You're tuned in to The Last Radio Show.
Well, thanks for tuning in to The Last Radio Show. I'm John Lynch.
I'm Jen Reilly.
Now, it's been a little while since we've done one of these.
Forever.
It's been a few years, actually, since we've done one of these.
I mean, so much has happened, I don't even think we can recap.
I think, yeah, we can't recap. The world went crazy, basically, between now and the last time we did one of these. But it's good to be back. It's always great to talk to you.
Yeah.
Jen and I have worked together many years, many times, many different places, all over the radio dial and all over the television sets and all over the world. Well, mostly Long Island, but anyway.
Right. But, with the technology today, who knows?
That's true.
Right?
We could be anywhere. So what I wanted to do today is I picked a topic, and you don't really know too much about this topic, but I'm going to tell you a little story.
Okay.
And we'll discuss it. All right?
I like it.
That sound good? All right.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump, you've heard of him.
Yes.
He's been in the news lately.
Right.
He dabbles in politics.
Right.
The last time we did one of these, I believe he was hosted The Apprentice.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. The last I remember, if I'm not mistaken.
So that was a while ago.
Yeah.
Things have changed. Of course, he was just reelected president after being elected in 2016, then losing in 2020, and then now he's back and he's going to be sworn in January. So one of the things that's interesting about Donald Trump, and as I think it's pretty well documented, half the people in the country really can't stand him. Half the people really love him.
Yes,
I mean,
it's fascinating, by the way.
It's an amazing dividing line.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing we can all agree about him
Yes.
is he has an unusual and unique relationship with the facts and with truth.
Yes.
He can kind of bend the truth a little bit,
right,
and maybe also just kind of make stuff up occasionally.
Right. And I think it's self-admitted, right?
It's more or less.
I've not seen him shy away from that.
I do think with all, everything that's been said and done about him, I do think he understands who he is and the effect he has on people.
Right.
So whether you love him or hate him, it's almost like a pro wrestling kind of thing. You either hate him or love him, and,
right,
you got your guy, though, and
And you make concessions for you let him bend the truth.
Yep. So I'm going to talk about one particular story that related to him. This actually dates back before he was president.
Oh, okay.
This actually goes back to 2009. So several years before he said he was going to run for president, and obviously before he was elected in 2016. This is called the Donald Trump and the River of Blood.
Ooh.
Now it's got a pretty cool title.
That sounds ominous.
It does sound ominous, but it's not quite as ominous as it sounds. Okay. But it is a strange tale. So Donald Trump, in addition to everything else he's done, also is pretty well known for owning a lot of golf courses.
Right.
He's got them all over the world, and he will tell you they're the finest golf courses in the world, and some of them are considered that. I mean, they're definitely. It's definitely a business venture he's been very successful with.
Probably one of the most successful,
I would guess.
Right?
I
in my own.
I have no idea of anybody else who owns a golf course. He's the only person I know.
Exactly.
So I guess he's the most successful because we know who he is. So in 2009, he opened a new golf course. And this was actually an existing golf course. It was down in Virginia. It's on Lowes Island, which is right off the Potomac, right on the Potomac River. And it was an existing golf course. He bought it, refurbished it, reopened it as a Trump golf course.
Okay.
Now, on this golf course, between the 14th and 15th hole, there's a flagpole and a plaque. And the flagpole and the plaque is dedicated to the Battle of the River of Blood.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to read what the plaque says. Many great American soldiers, both of the North and South, died on this spot, the rapids on the Potomac River. The casualties were so great that the water turned red and thus became known as the River of Blood. And then under that, it bears the name of the Trump Organization, Donald Trump's full name, the Trump Organization logo, and it says, "It is my great honor to have preserved this important section of the Potomac River."
Okay.
Now,
I'm very naive, and I'm not going to add a lot to this historically, so you're going to have to school me.
Well, the interesting thing is the historical stuff is where this kind of goes off the rails.
Okay.
So one thing I find is interesting, he said he's preserving the spot. There's a golf course there. It's not really, it's not necessarily preserved.
Right, except for everything else. Yes. This little spot.
Yes. But there's a plaque, there's a nice flag there.
Okay.
And so somebody from a golf magazine was doing a story about this golf course, saw the plaque, and decided to research it a little bit. So he reached out to local historians, to talk about this battle and to find out, what happened, what are the details of it, because, he thought it would be interesting talking about the golf course and talking about the history.
Right.
Apparently nothing ever happened at this spot.
Well, that's sort of, is there an actual river? Like, what is the deal?
Well, there is a river. The Potomac River is there.
But like right near, or
it's like right overlooking the river.
It's right. Okay,
so it's right there.
So that's right. Geographically, there is a
that
river
is accurate. There is. We can confirm a river.
Okay, great.
River,
okay, let's
not necessarily bloody, but a river nonetheless. It's a river of water, as far as we know.
Okay,
and fish and other things that are in rivers.
Right.
So this writer for the Golf magazine wrote out to several local historians and said nothing of any significance historical happened in this area.
So it's made up.
Completely made up, apparently. So there's that. So they actually looked at, which is kind of a problem when you got a plaque honoring something that actually didn't exist.
Did it happen anywhere near, within a radius?
They actually talked. That was the follow-up question,
okay.
and again, reaching out to many local historians in the area. Now, if you've ever been to Virginia, it's all history.
Right,
of course, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, Washington, D.C.'s right there.
Right.
Many of our presidents were from Virginia.
Yes.
It's all about history. I mean, if you're going to do a history road trip, go to Virginia.
Right.
Because there's, preserved everything there from all kinds of different periods.
Sure.
And there's probably more historians than you could shake a stick at around there. So there were a couple of engagements in the general area. They did say that Jeb Stuart, who was a Confederate general, did cross the river in that general area.
Okay.
Not where Trump's golf course is, but within about 10 or 15 miles.
Okay.
But there was no battle. He just went across the road. There was no casualties reported. There was no incident. They just crossed and then, kept going.
Right.
So it might as well have just been a toll bridge at this point. So, and there was a skirmish maybe about 20 miles away where they said 2 people were killed.
Okay.
And that basically was just a couple of people during the Civil War, a couple of Union soldiers, a couple of Confederate soldiers, and they saw each other and they shot each other.
Like a bar fight, but
more or less. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we're talking single-digit casualties and low single digits, like maybe 2 people.
Right.
So to call it the River of Blood is definitely an exaggeration.
Right.
The other thing that I do, we're going to touch, kind of dissect a little bit about the things on the plaque that he talks about.
Okay.
But as this story broke, and again, it was early in, the golf writer wrote about it before the whole presidential run happened. Oh. And then when he started running for president and made some other statements in regards to history, which have been kind of considered kind of cockeyed,
right.
Somebody discovered this story in the Golf magazine from the New York Times, and in 2016 asked Trump about it.
Okay.
So this was, when he was, in the midst of 2015 or 2016. I don't know if he was elected yet or if he was still running for president.
Okay.
But, when he was in full political mode at this point. And so basically they said, what's the deal?
Right,
what's this about?
And get this info.
So Trump's response was, and I'm quoting here, this was a prime site for river crossings. So if people are crossing the river and you happen to be in a civil war, I would say people were shot, a lot of them. How would I know that? Mr. Trump asking local historians. How would they know that there weren't any people who killed there? The historians is what he asked.
Oh, so we're doing default.
So it's
you can't prove there weren't.
Right.
So
you can't. You weren't there. So which is true. But I did some checking, and Donald Trump was probably not there either.
Right.
And so there's no historical record of anybody dying at this location in the Civil War or in any other military engagement in history.
Right.
But he said that well, this is a spot people would cross the river, so there must have been. Yeah. So
that's suspect.
That is a little suspect. And so basically, he kind of ended the interview about this topic and said, "Well, you're going to write what you want to write. That's it." Which is kind of his default mode when he's kind of cornered on things. He just says, "Well, you're going to say whatever you want to say. So what difference does that make what I say?" So the River of Blood never happened, but the plaque is still there on the golf course.
Right.
And I do want to dive a little bit into some of the things that are in there, which is kind of interesting and kind of tie with some of the other things he has said in the past.
By the way, I would like to learn how to do that. Like when someone approaches me like to say, oh, that's not true. Like I would like to learn how. I have no idea. Like I no poker face. No, it's like, I'll just tell you what I will confess every second. This is like a skill that I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like you're like able to turn it around.
Well, it goes back to the very famous quote he said when he was first running for president the first time, is that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and wouldn't lose any voters.
Right.
And I do think you could dissect that a little bit and think about it. Well, there's some truth to that because there's been a lot of stuff, negative things about him, indictments and allegations of sexual assaults. And he's been had all kinds of problems when he was president. He was, censured and all this kind of stuff, impeached twice. And, here he is back again in the presidency.
Right.
I do think that. And that's kind of why I wanted to circle around to this one, because it's a small story. It's a big deal. There's a plaque on a golf course.
Right.
What does that mean in the big thing? But what's amazing about him and why I think he can get away with this stuff is that he continues, the next thing is going to dwarf this thing.
Oh, right. So you think he's just like Trump?
Yeah, it's
trumping
himself,
right?
He's perfectly named.
Right.
Because he trumps himself because you kind of forget about the craziness of the last thing because the next thing is going to be a little wacky.
Right.
And he's had that pattern throughout, especially in the time in his political career. Even before that, he was the first I think a lot of people knew of Donald Trump was in the 80s. And of course, he was very famous for real estate, and he owned the USFL football team, the Jersey Generals. Okay. That was kind of where he first became like a celebrity.
Right.
And there's a wonderful documentary, The History of the USFL, which was, a startup football league that was competing against the NFL, and they were trying to, do their own thing kind of. And he bought into the New Jersey team, and basically he kind of shystered all the other owners and made some money on it, and the league kind of defaulted.
Oh.
There's a great documentary that ESPN did years before he was even president, so you can't even say it's a political thing.
Right.
Kind of like saying how he kind of almost single-handedly destroyed this entity.
Really?
For his own benefit. Yeah. Maybe we'll do a show on the USFL at one point. Because that is just a fascinating.
I've never heard that story.
Yeah, and again, that was really where he first became known, I think, to a lot of people.
Right.
Because he owned this football team, and he was kind of like, George Steinbrenner was famously for being a very vocal owner when he owned the Yankees.
Yes,
and Donald Trump was kind of like a George Steinbrenner-esque owner. He was always talking to the press and, very out there and, very, talking about his coaches and stuff like that, so that's kind of where he really first got his mainstream exposure in media. Before that, he was just a real estate guy,
right.
And, he had a lot of money and, was successful. And, then, of course, he opened the casinos in Atlantic City.
And he really made the name. I mean, the marketing of that name.
Right.
And I feel like that is in and of itself.
Right. I mean, there's Trump Steaks.
Right.
There was
like he's
Trump
the first
board
person
game.
I remember that it was like Trump this. Like, and then everything else just kind of.
In very big gold letters.
Yeah. it was just like, this is.
Trump
this
Tower,
is
kind of thing. But getting back to the River of Blood, and the somewhat historically inaccurate River of Bloods, and by somewhat completely inaccurate. So he said the plaque says again, many great American soldiers, both of the North and South, died on this spot.
Right, that confused me. Actually, I wanted to stop you right there because I was like, what happened? Like, where is the good in this? Like, where
right.
Like, I'm not sure.
It's
right. Who are you supporting, or what are you supporting?
Very famously, he made a comment when there was some race riots in South Carolina going on, that there were good people on both sides.
Yes, right.
And I
don't think he was meaning like there's good in everyone.
Right.
Like that's like not what it was going on.
It was kind of like they both have points.
Right.
Now,
like the bad. Right.
Now, if you study history, the Confederacy wasn't great.
Right.
I mean, there's always been the debate when you ask people about the Civil War and they say, well, it's about states' rights. It's about, an agricultural society versus an industrial society, blah, blah, blah. It was about slavery.
Right. And at the end, they just didn't want to give the slavery up, which, was bad.
Which was bad.
Right?
They were enslaving people, which, not good.
So no good in that.
No good in that. Right. So, I'm sure the regular foot soldiers, I'm sure there was probably some decent folk in there, but still, Yeah.
So what are you actually saying when you're saying
right?
this?
Exactly. Again, it's a
But that's what his genius is, because he could always say, well, I meant like everyone has good, like right. There's an ambiguous, I can't say that word right now.
Ambiguous.
Yeah, ambiguous like
yeah.
kind of connotation to what he says, which is
right.
And then he can always take it back.
Right.
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 Or I didn't mean that.
And I do also find that a lot of his supporters will say, well, that's not what he meant.
Yes.
That is a very big refrain. And like, well, maybe he should say what he means.
Right. But if you say what you mean, then you have to be accurate and kind of right and then stand behind it. There's like a whole bunch of things that go with that.
But he gets himself the out, because it is amazing.
And again, that's like something that you just can't learn. I don't know how it's.
And, obviously, we've seen, in this election that, there were people up and down who never thought in a million years he would be back.
I mean, I was one of them.
I mean, I thought so too. I mean, it's definitely,
I'm not saying, I'm not booing anyone. I'm just saying I was shocked.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were. It was definitely, and and he won relatively easy too, which is amazing.
Right.
But when you think about like all the baggage, again, there's multiple criminal trials that he's gone through.
Right.
And it just seems to make him stronger in a weird way, and galvanizes his supporters. But what's interesting is like, okay, there's this percentage, whatever that percentage might be, who's always going to support him.
Right.
And there's this percentage, whatever that might be, who's always going to not support him, be against him.
Right.
There's that gray area of that, whether it's 10 or 20%, whatever it is, that could go either way, the undecided, the independent voters. And it's surprising how much of them go towards him and have gone towards him in this election.
Right. Yeah, it really is. And I'm an independent personally, so I can understand that mindset of let's just dive in and see what the person says and not have to go along party lines. But at the same time, what are they saying? What is he saying? I can't put my finger on something that he has said that would just bring everybody to that side, especially in the numbers. Right.
I mean, obviously, as they said when in the Bill Clinton campaign, when he first ran for president, it's the economy, stupid. And the economy's been rough. I mean, prices have gone up. So voters tend to look for change.
Right.
But also, you're changing back to the guy who was president 4 years ago.
Right.
And, 4 years ago is when the economy started going down. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with COVID and everything else. But
that's not the answer. You know what I think the answer is, though? I have a theory.
Okay.
And I don't know. I'm going to go way off track, so pull me back.
All right.
I think it's the Kardashian effect. I think reality TV has just changed everybody's.
I think that's pretty astute, actually.
Right? I just think reality TV has changed everybody's vantage point to where they may think they know him, something what he did on The Apprentice, maybe take charge, that personality. I think is bigger than maybe because you don't see that. You get a guy that's a senator, you don't know him, he comes up, you don't. You're like, I gotta trust this guy. I don't know, or
even
her.
Kamala Harris, she was vice president for 4 years. How much do you really know? You didn't
really know. People didn't feel like they knew her enough, and that was, which is scary also because the television is scripted and it's created to give you this idea of somebody, but it's just a fascinating. I think that I just feel like that has to be the thing that pushed people.
And it's and to go to the left side of things politically, Bill Clinton, who was not a reality star, but kind of had that vibe of reality TV.
Into it,
with he had his issues to be sure. And with the whole Monica Lewinsky affair and stuff like that, it was tabloid TV type stuff. So, and again, I think we know him better than we do. Maybe either the Bushes or Biden or
people that were stand up. Presidents used to be it was behind some sort of curtain.
And I will say, I think wherever you stand politically, I think the both George Bushes, Joe Biden, John McCain, Mitt Romney, some of the other people who have run. I think these are all more or less stand up people. I may not agree with them politically on a lot of things. But I would say for the most part, they are decent people and they are people who, have a moral code and are just trying to
believe whatever they're
saying.
And then trying to, I mean, I'm a big Barack Obama fan.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think he was able to convey like what he felt.
Yes.
I feel like when you spoke to Barack Obama, you saw him listening. Like I
Right.
actually feel like he was like, okay, and now
Right.
I'm going to respond.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of disappeared. That kind of
Right.
like, I'm hearing what you're saying, and then I'm going to respond honestly. And
Right.
you know, I don't know, but
Right.
so I think again, back to the reality TV show like thing, like that's kind of like where we've moved to a little bit. I don't want to blame the Kardashians, but I feel like it
You can
started
blame
with
the
them.
Kardashians,
I mean,
sure.
I like them, but it
Fair
started
enough.
with them.
You know, it's interesting with I believe it was 2007, The Apprentice started or around there. I'm not sure the exact year, but there was a writer's strike in Hollywood.
Okay.
And so there weren't any new TV shows being produced for the TV series.
Okay.
So television networks went in heavy on reality TV show. That's when reality TV show really took off, because it technically, even though it is not considered scripted television.
Right.
So you could get around the writers union,
Right. You
because
do
it
summary.
was a reality show.
Right.
And that's when The Apprentice was launched.
Oh.
So technically the writer's strike led to The Apprentice, which I think it's pretty clear that if he didn't have that show, I don't think he would have made it to where he is.
I don't think so. By the way, I couldn't watch that show because it was too aggressive for me. So that's interesting that like, I didn't like it. I didn't like his personality on that show. Like everything about it, just like,
and what's interesting about, and I never really watched the show either.
Right.
And, but obviously we've all seen clips of it.
Yeah.
The first season or the first couple of seasons, it was regular people.
Right.
Who were competing to get the job or
Right.
whatever it was.
Interesting idea, for sure.
Yeah, and they were working in the Trump organization and, getting these assignments and stuff like that. And the ratings weren't great out of the gate.
Right.
But then when they switched, I think the second season, they switched to Celebrity Apprentice.
Oh, okay.
And they brought in all these B celebrities.
Right.
And again, it was people like Meatloaf.
Right.
And,
I forgot about that. Right.
and it was, Gary Busey and all these kinds of people. And they were the characters because they were kind of wacky and did all kinds of stuff. And it was like, oh, let's take, this person who, you remember from this sitcom in the 80s and have them try and, open a business, and see how that goes, kind of thing.
Right. And again, like you felt like, that it's all like remembering or like nostalgic or things that people that you think right? So they put the celebrities on because you know them, and now you've got now you're vested,
right?
And I think that's what this is created. Like you want to be vested in everything and everyone now, and it's just a wild ride.
And Trump connects with voters who live in middle America,
right?
Some lower income people out there, and they think he's
maybe feel disconnected.
Maybe they feel disconnected, and certainly they feel disconnected. But they connect with him and think he's one of them, which is astonishing.
Yeah, that's actually something that's another like very interesting thing. How he has gotten that kind of like I'm one of you, type of
like I know your pain,
right?
I know what you're going through, and. No.
And then you see him at McDonald's and you clearly know that he doesn't belong there, and that is not so he can't even, it's not like it's just this weird kind of, but I do know you. But maybe it's like a kind of a savior thing, like, oh, finally someone is recognizing. I guess that's maybe what it is.
But he's someone who, grew up with his father was a millionaire when he was born. And one of the things I remember when he said he first started his business, which was just taking over the family business.
Right.
And he said, he got a small loan from his father of $1 million in like the 70s.
Right. Oh,
which $1 million in the 70s was like $1 billion today.
Right. Oh my.
And, that's not a small loan.
So basically you could have bought like every house in the Hamptons and then just left for like 30 years. Right?
There are financial planners, of course he's had multiple bankruptcies and, had, lots of issues financially up and down kind of thing. And there are economic people, and again, this is way beyond my area of expertise, but they said if he just took his money, whatever he inherited, whatever he was born with, and just like left that in, a 401k, he would be worth like 3 times more than he is now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's, all the investments and stuff like that he did. If you look at it, he's had many failed businesses, and, the whole, the Trump Airlines, Trump Steaks, Trump this, Trump that, none of those things really worked.
Right.
But they did get his name out there, which is what's most important.
For sure.
To him.
And nobody's remembering the bankruptcies, and people are, but they're not really focusing on it. And then, you still have that name.
Right.
And that face, which
Right.
is very, very
Right.
recognizable.
Yes, on all its shades of orange and all its glory. But, but it all comes back to the River of Blood. And so if you go to the golf course, you can see the plaque. You can see how it's preserved with the plaque.
Right.
And, you can go.
And it's still there. So after this whole controversy.
It's still there.
Because you doubled down. That's the other thing.
He does double down.
Poker face. It's
He
like,
doubles down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what are you going to do about it? You weren't there.
Well, even his response, he's like, well, people cross the river here, so
Right.
something must have happened.
Yeah. And you weren't there. And there's no photography or
there's
anything.
no photography, so how do we know? How do they know? And what's interesting is nobody really knows where the story started.
Oh, okay.
There's kind of like people, like somebody, there's no record of this being a folklore or a local tale or anything
Right.
before this plaque.
Right.
So nobody knows the origins of this.
So it's just
It's just it's not even there's the old timer at the county store said
Right.
my great grandpappy died in the River of Blood here in 1999
Right.
And
so basically you can take your house, your backyard, and throw something on that might happen.
I don't want to brag. I don't want to brag, but my house in Ronkonkoma in the backyard
Right.
is actually where Benjamin Franklin was flying the kite and hit the lightning.
Right. Oh,
yeah.
my goodness.
It was a really long string because it was in Philadelphia, but the kite was actually over my house.
Right, when
And
it got struck.
you weren't there, so you can't say
Right,
it wasn't.
right.
And
Wow.
So
you get the plaque.
yeah, plaque, a little flagpole. I can preserve my backyard. Right next, just as former and future President Donald Trump did at the River of Blood. Well, this is the idea of the show. We're gonna basically take a kind of a wacky little subject and ramble on about it. It's not always going to be politics. It's not we'll talk about entertainment stuff and pop culture stuff, music stuff, all that kind of cool stuff.
Right.
But we got to start doing this regular again.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm getting my feet wet. I like it.
All right, this is pretty good stuff,
Yeah.
I think. So we'll do this again real soon.
All right.
The Last Radio Show.
The Last Radio Show.